Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the MJ Innocent podcast. My name is Moonwalker Tanya, and I am your host. All right, so to give you guys a short update of how I'm doing, I'm not limping, or at least I wasn't today. Bones are still a little bruised, still a little painful, but I'm getting there. I would say the hardest thing for me was that I was actually in bed all day today. I was just trying to sleep it off. Yeah. Still walking a little slow, but, I would say the part that I don't like about this is that I couldn't exercise today. I like to put on my headphones and dance to Michael's music, which, let me just go on the record and say you will never see a Moonwalker Tanya dance video. Trust me, you don't want to see that. But other than that, I'm still trying to take it easy, and yeah, hopefully within another day or two, it'll be better. Yeah. Okay, so in this episode, I want to talk about how both Wade and James claimed that Michael basically threatened them and manipulated them to keep their false allegations quiet. And then I'm going to bring out a very interesting coincidence. Okay, so both Wade and James said that Michael told them, quote, "We loved each other, and this is what we do to show our love to each other. But if you tell anyone what we are doing, both of our lives will be over, and we'll both go to jail for the rest of our lives." Now, Wade claimed that he was abused from ages 7 to 14, and then James was 10 to 14. I understand that some children, and even some adults for that matter, can be manipulated to stay silent. But at the same time, I think we all know that kids are not very good secret keepers. I'm even an auntie of 3, so I definitely know. But the biggest problem is, and I know that I can't always use my experience as evidence, but if someone said something like that to me, and then like if my mother or my father or a cousin or my grandparents or anything like that, if they then said, "I love you, Tanya," I'd be like, "I love you too, but we can't tell anyone, right? Because both of our lives will be over and we'll both go to jail." They would be suspicious on the spot, obviously. And I also wanted to point out that usually there are some warning signs that you can look out for if your child is being molested. But just remember, they are just warning signs. It's not like hard evidence. Because I've also seen this on TV shows that talked about child molestation. Usually, if a child does touch themselves inappropriately, or sometimes they might touch other people inappropriately, those could be signs. But remember, it's not hard evidence yet. Because, it's like children, they don't understand that there are parts of the human body that you just don't touch. So they just might not understand that lesson yet. And sometimes it could be a warning sign of something more serious, but not always. And so I think it's interesting how no one from Wade's family, or even James's family for that matter, they never said, "Well, I kind of did see him like touch himself inappropriately," or they wanted to do these very weird things with me that you normally would not do, with a relative, and there was nothing like that. Because if a child was told that it's love, then they wouldn't see anything wrong with it. And then they would try to do it with other people, which is unfortunate. But, like I said, I've seen many episodes on multiple shows talking about it. But there was nothing like that. But then at the same time, I can understand that if this actually happened, which we know it didn't, if Wade and James were afraid to come forward back in 93, that would be one thing. But during the trial, not only was Wade the star witness for the defense, but both men were unfortunately sexually active. They knew what sex was, and they knew that sexual contact between an adult and a child is inappropriate. But the problem is, they were acting as if it was like a big secret that they didn't realize until they were in their 30s. Or actually, in Wade's case, it would be the late 20s, I believe. Yeah, something like that. Anyway. Yeah. It was even like on their stupid podcast, which is called From Trauma to Triumph, which I do believe they stole part of that title from the Jackson 5, that James even tried to say, like, it took me a while to realize this, but I think I was raped. I'm like, you are such an idiot, James. Anyway. I also wanted to ask any of you who are real survivors of CSA, you know, if you ever were threatened to keep your mouth shut about it, did you have someone that you could open up to without being judged? And, like, was there someone that you could reach out to let them know that this happened to you? Because I am curious. Because when I was sexually assaulted by a male classmate and sexually harassed by one of my teachers, neither of them threatened me in any way. They never said, you better keep quiet about this. But the truth is, even if they did say that to me, I wouldn't have done it. And another interesting coincidence about this is I want to give credit to Matt's FTR, because he said this while we were actually watching the mockumentary on StreamYard. He said that he thought it was interesting that James claimed that this was supposed to be a secret, but then James's mom, Stephanie Safechuck, talked about how Michael allegedly went up to her and said, can you convince James to hold my hand? But just so you know, people are gonna think it's weird, but there's nothing inappropriate about it. I mean, Michael wasn't stupid, people. He was a little naive, but not stupid. So, yeah, I think what I want to do now is, it would be nice for me to tell you guys what happened to me back in high school. I know I have talked about it before, but that video no longer exists. So it would be good to talk about it and just to get it over with. Oh, and I would like to interview real survivors of CSA. We would have to do it over a video call on Instagram, because that would really be the only way I think that we could do it. So, yeah, it's just a little idea that I'll do a little later. Okay, so when I was sexually assaulted by my male classmate, who I originally referred to as Greg, but I don't want to do that anymore. So I am going to reveal his real name, but only his first name. Okay, so this happened in either late April or early May of 2004. It was right after lunchtime. Some friends and I, we were hanging out in the English hallway. And we had a few minutes between after lunch and going back to class. And, we were just hanging out and talking. And Danny, who was on the football team, he wondered if he could give me a hug. And I said, sure, absolutely. Well, right after I said yes, a group of classmates formed a circle around us, and I was suspicious, but then I thought, well, Danny and we've been friends for years. He's not going to do anything to me. Man, was I wrong. So we hugged, and for the first few seconds, it was nothing out of the ordinary. Then all of a sudden, he tightens one hand on my back. He grabs my butt with his other hand, and then he starts dry humping me in front of everybody. The classmates that were standing around us were laughing and pointing at me. I started crying, and I was trying to break free, but he tightened his grip on me. And I don't remember how I broke free. I don't remember if I punched him or smacked him. I don't know. But eventually I did break free, and I yelled at all of those classmates. And then they stared at me like, "What is wrong with you?" Like it was my fault. And then I said, "How would you feel if someone did that to you, and then you see a bunch of other people just staring at you, laughing at you, and pointing at you?" And they didn't say anything, of course. I do believe now that Danny was dared to do it, because why else would there be so many witnesses? He did not threaten me to stay quiet about it, which is ironic because our fathers are actually friends. They still are. Our fathers actually wanted Danny and I to get together. And, at one time I did like him, but now I'm glad we were never more than friends. Let's see. So I told my parents the same night, and they wondered what exactly did Danny do. And obviously, I was not going to ask my parents to stand next to me so I could demonstrate. So I said, "Dad, can I borrow one of your golf clubs?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure." So I took the golf club, and I was very nervous and upset because I knew this was going to be embarrassing to show them. So I told them to pretend that I was the golf club and I was Danny. I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Just in case if I messed that up, let me just go ahead and say that again. I told them to pretend that the golf club was me and I was Danny. Okay, I'm sorry. Had a little bit of a... yeah. Okay, so anyway, I basically placed my hands the same way that Danny put his hands on me, and then I started dry humping the golf club, and I'm in tears the entire time while I'm demonstrating to my parents because I was embarrassed. I told them that I wanted them to handle whatever they had to do. I do not know if my parents spoke to Danny's parents about this. I personally do not know if they ever went to the principal or the authorities, because I told them that I didn't want to know anything that happened, And I also want to go on record and say that my parents are not the kind of people who would just brush it off or not do anything, and they especially would not go to a civil lawyer. So, even though it may seem like Danny might have gotten away with it, well, 2 years later, both Danny and some of his friends did something very stupid, and they ended up getting expelled, and Danny was kicked off the football team. So what happened was, I'm probably not going to be able to go into deep specifics of what they did, so I will have to say it in a different way. So the guys got into Danny's truck, they drove up to the school, and there was a machine outside the school that had water bottles and stuff like that in it. They put a specific something in the machine, And then 15 minutes later, boom. Yeah. And so I don't know how the guys were caught. So anyway, yeah, Danny was kicked out the football team and they were all expelled. And yeah, ironically, that was the same year that one of my teachers sexually harassed me. And it does turn out that I was not the only female student he was doing it to. And there were some of my classmates who actually liked this teacher because he wasn't the typical teacher. You know, he cursed in class. He didn't care if we cursed. You know, he just wasn't very professional, so I didn't really like him that much. And I hate to point fingers gender-wise, but let's just say my male classmates, they liked him a lot more than my female classmates. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's true. And he was just very rude. Like, I remember one day when I walked into class, I said, "How was your weekend?" And he said, "Oh, my weekend was great. I just spent the entire time beating the hell out of my wife." I'm thinking in my head, why do I even bother? Yeah. And this next part is partly my fault because I did wear a mini skirt that was against the dress code. Hang on just a sec, I'm losing my balance. Okay, sorry about that. And one of my classmates was trying to get me in trouble, even though she was the kind of girl that always got in trouble. Yeah, definitely one of those. So she went to the teacher and she said, "Aren't you going to write Tanya up for wearing that miniskirt?" And he said, "Nah, if Tanya showed up to class completely naked, it wouldn't bother me." Yeah, he said that to me in front of everyone. Over 20 witnesses in that classroom heard what he said. But instead of being concerned, a lot of my classmates were laughing at me. And then to make it worse, he would always bring a stool and put it by the door, and he would sit there like towards the end of class. Hang on just for a minute, I'll show you how weird it was. Okay, so obviously the classroom door is a lot bigger than my bedroom door right here, but he would put the stool like right about there or so there really wasn't a lot of room between the space in the door that's left and him, and that always freaked me out. I tried not to think of anything of it, but I just thought, since he was making inappropriate statements, I thought, well, just a little suspicion. And then I remember towards the end of that class, I stood up in line to get ready to leave, and I saw him. He was staring at me from the top of my head, then he went all the way down to my boots, and then went all the way back up, and then again, in front of all those witnesses, he says, "You really do look sexy in that outfit." I was disgusted. And that's when I began to really be afraid of him sitting on that stool right by the door. Because without that space, would he possibly try to grab my ass like Danny did, or stare at my boobs? I was terrified. But I mean, thankfully he never did any of that, at least to me. But the fact that he was being a pervert when he was, I don't know how old he was at that time. I'm guessing maybe somewhere in the 50s. That's a pretty good guess. And I was 17 at the time. So obviously he was being very inappropriate to an underage girl. And he did not threaten any of us to keep our mouths shut. And no, he also did not say that it was a way of showing love. So I went home and I told my parents about what happened the same day. And my parents were furious. And I think they were afraid that he would try to do something else, like how I was afraid. And so the next day, my father and I went to the principal's office. I told the principal about how the teacher was cursing in class, the inappropriate things they were saying, about like the physical abuse towards his wife, which, I don't know. Maybe he actually did do that. I don't know. And also I told the principal about all the sexual things that he said. And my father wanted this guy to be fired. And from what I heard at the time, at least 5 other girls came forward with basically the same allegations that I had. But unfortunately, my teacher was not fired. And tell me in the comments if you think that a teacher should be fired even if they only say something sexual to an underage child. Because in my opinion, I think they should. Because, obviously, sexual abuse would be much worse, obviously. But the fact that a grown man is saying stuff like that to underage girls, that usually leads to trouble. I would say the only thing that really did change after that was, I don't remember him making inappropriate comments to me after that. And he also said that we were not allowed to curse in class anymore. So I knew the principal spoke to him, and yeah, I just came prepared in case I had to take action. So I would wear my high-heeled boots most of the time. I didn't wear them every day because they obviously were very painful to wear. But let's just say if I had to defend myself, well, I could make him fall like a ton of bricks with those boots. And yeah. And then I also carried a bottle of perfume in my purse if I had to splash it in his eyes, if I had to. Thankfully, I never had to do either one, but I was prepared in case I had to. Because the problem is, I will admit that I did have a fear that since the guys liked him and the girls didn't, there was a time when I thought, what if he tries to block the door where we can't get away and the guys would hold us down so he could do stuff? Yeah, I know that's dramatic, but that's what I was afraid of at the time. And again, I was 17. And I also want to go on the record and say that when both Danny and the teacher did these things to me, I did not know anything about the birds and the bees, but I still knew it was wrong. And I also want to say that when it comes to both the teacher and Danny, I did not believe that it was love. It's not how you show love. I did not believe that we were in love with each other. And I also did not believe that we were going to be together forever. But then, unfortunately, to make it worse, a few years later, when I was in college, I found out this teacher was fired for having sex with a student. And so, I know sometimes people say stupid things without thinking, and maybe they deserve a second chance. But when I found out that he was fired, I wondered how many other females he was inappropriate with before I was a student and after, and how many other students he might have taken advantage of. For now, I only know of the one. But I would be shocked if she was the only one. I'm just thankful that he didn't touch me in any way, but if he did, he was going to be kicked in between the legs, and I was going to most likely punch him and blind him, because I do have the right to defend myself. And I remember after my father and I left the principal's office, that teacher in question actually walked into the main office. And so I was terrified. So my father and I walked out the back door of the principal's office. And my dad pulled me aside and he was like, look, if he's suspicious of you and he tries to do anything, kick him between the legs and punch him in the face and then run for your life. I'm like, you got it, Dad. But like I said, thankfully, it didn't come to that. But all I can say is, I'm thankful that I had someone that I could talk to. And I knew that, coming forward was the right thing to do. I know that's not always the case when it comes to child molestation. But all I can say is, there should be at least one person that you can reach out to. And another thing that also doesn't make sense is Wade and James did not spend a lot of time with Michael compared to other kids. So even if Michael did threaten them, which he didn't, they didn't live at Neverland. They were always with their families. They were with other people. So, and there's always the witness protection program. They could have gone into hiding if the abuse actually happened so they could be safe. While the authorities were investigating him, they even had a hotline where potential victims could come forward and tell what happened. And even Tom Sneddon went all over the world seeking kids that Michael had interactions with to find out if they were abused. So, yeah. Okay, so I think that was pretty good for this episode. Please let me know how you feel about this in the comments, and I will see you soon. I love you.